My pretty common-law wife Ellen was wearing a sexy dress with a short skirt that gave a great view of her beautiful legs. She was standing in the kitchen waiting for a cab that was taking her to a divorce party thrown by Jenny, one of her best friends. In our Scandinavian town, a divorce party seemed like an odd event, so I asked her, "Why the sexy outfit for this stupid party? Please don't collect silly ideas for your divorce party here." She left, and the next time I saw her was a little after 2:30 in the morning when she returned. I pretended to be asleep and heard her as she undressed in the bathroom, fell onto the bed, and was asleep within a minute. I knew that the bar where Jenny had her stupid parties always closed at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was obvious that Ellen had been somewhere else for at least another hour, and possibly longer if she had left the bar earlier. That made me suspicious. I waited a few minutes to make sure she was asleep and went to the bathroom where her clothes were piled in a heap. I found her panties, which looked soiled, so I took them out of the pile to examine them later. I also noticed that there was only one of her expensive IVs lying on the shelf. During breakfast, Ellen looked a little haggard, but said she was fine. When I asked her about the party, she said, "Pretty boring. Not many people in the bar. There weren't many guys to dance with. I only danced a few times, and I think I got home pretty early." What a shameless lying bitch. Now, I was pretty sure she had slept with someone during the night and lost her eardrop during sex. A friend of mine caught his cheating wife by detecting traces in her panties with a detector kit he bought from one of the mail order companies. After a phone conversation with him, his kit was put to good use again. As I suspected, we found traces in Ellen's panties, and she had clearly been fucked during the divorce party. It was a sad day for me. All my plans for marriage and a happy future with Ellen had to be canceled. I really disliked cheating because of painful experiences in the past. My first wife had an affair with a married coworker less than a year after we were married, and our divorce was terribly messy. To my great fortune, I met Ellen, a single mom who had been abandoned by her husband of 3 years. She and her son moved into my house 4 years ago, and I was very happy with her. We talked about marriage, children, and adopting her son, Oscar. Depending on the circumstances, my sweet Ellen now had very little chance of avoiding a separation. I decided to wait a while to see if she would regret it and admit to cheating, explaining with the sane explanation that she had been drugged and raped. Of course, she noticed I was in a bad mood and tried to cheer me up with sex when we got into bed the evening after her party. She was very surprised when I, for the first time in our relationship, refused her offer of sex. And the same thing happened the next night. Ellen didn't mention the missing panties, but apparently guessed some connection between my refusal and hers. On Friday, I called her best friend and co-worker Linda. Even she was at the divorce party, so I got straight to the point and asked her who Ellen had slept with after the party that holiday night. When she pretended she didn't know anything, I sassed her and told her she had a simple choice. "Tell me about Ellen's infidelity, or I'll tell your husband what you did with Ronnie at the last Christmas party." Calling me by name, Linda said she knew only that it was a blonde man named Lars who had dined with Ellen several times in recent weeks. It was Ellen who had suggested he come to her place in that pub, where she had ignored all the warnings of the others as she left the pub with him. Linda knew about the missing drop and said that Ellen, though she had gotten a few more warnings from her friends when she promised to meet Lars at his apartment for a couple hours after work on Friday. Ellen said she had agreed to pay Lars in sex for returning her expensive eardrop, and Ellen wanted to have exciting sex with a well-equipped Lars. Ellen left work at 1 o'clock on Fridays, and since I worked until 4 on Fridays, that left Ellen a few free hours for her planned cheating. But that Friday I left work at noon because I was curious to see what Helene would do. I knew that Friday morning her eardrop was still missing, and she would probably go to Lars for sex and her eardrop, just like Linda had told me. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I watched the parking lot at Ellen's work, and when she left, I followed her car. She drove straight to a large, newly built building with expensive apartments and parked there in the visitors' parking lot. I parked my car in the back alley, used the spare key to Ellen's car, and drove it home to my driveway. Once home, I called our home phone, as I suspected it had been switched to Ellen's phone. It was, and when Ellen answered the phone, she pretended to be at home and cleaning. I told her that the reason I called was because I would be an hour late at work. Again, she lied to me. 20 minutes later, I called the home phone again, and when Ellen answered from her cell phone after a while, I asked her if she was home, and she said, "Yes, of course she is." I told her, "Good, important events have happened, and I will be home in 3 minutes with beautiful cakes for an important celebration, pour coffee." I then turned off my cell phone. I was sure that Ellen felt trapped by her lies, and was beginning to suspect that her cheating might have a very high price. Of course, I'll never know how she reacted to my call, and it must have gotten worse when she saw her car was missing. I can only assume it was close to panic. If she still cared about our relationship, she must have realized that her lie about being home when I called her would be very hard to explain, and that the future was not going to be at all what we had planned. However, just in case she still cared about me and wanted to make a desperate attempt to win my forgiveness, I expected her to be home within 15 to 30 minutes. How right I was. About 20 minutes later, a black Hyundai Tucson with a blonde-haired guy and Ellen pulled up on the street in front of my driveway. Seeing the car in the driveway, he and the driver yelled at each other for a few seconds before Ellen opened the passenger side door. That gave me enough time to rush to the driver's door, catch the guy off guard, and since he wasn't buckled in, easily get him out of the car. Now that he was lying on the street, I gave him several hard blows to his face and body and balls before throwing him into the back seat. I then shouted to a frightened Ellen, "Get that damn trash out of here and don't you dare come back here until tomorrow. I'll pick up Oscar from daycare and take him to your parents." I could never understand why Ellen, who had been so jealous of Jenny's divorce, was not at all happy about her newfound freedom from me. Even though she could now do whatever she wanted, date and have fun with as many guys as she wanted, she wasn't happy at all. Instead of having a party, her friends told me that Ellen cried and sobbed for days.